Oh no, we've lost our head.
And yet we still saved, but let's move on, shall we?
Yeah.
Though if I can move back for a second, I will recall that one of the messages you hear upon getting a game over in Earthbound is, looks like you got your head handed to you.
Actually, that might be a clever reference to Earthbound. If it is, good for them.
I really don't think that it is, especially considering we now have our head back for seemingly no reason.
I guess they just wanted to kind of get that initial punch of having you cut your own head off. That's kind of what I've been getting out of this whole dungeon. I touch on that a little bit in the sort of long-form write-ups that I did for the episodes, or one of them a couple back. This dungeon is like all style and no substance, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I definitely hear you.
It's all about this like visual impact, and then there's just nothing behind it. There's no meaning to pick apart. It's almost an insult to the idea of surrealism, isn't it?
I remember bringing up a couple episodes back that it was going for a kind of YIIK aesthetic that, in a couple of ways, almost works, because with YIIK, the whole idea of it was that you didn't really have any understanding or context for any of the visuals or what was going on or what this person was thinking when going through these incredibly surreal circumstances.
Yeah. And we did talk about that, you're right, and I actually agreed with you. It is very YIIK in that way. But I would argue that YIIK, again, to retread some of that conversation, has more in common with the sort of suspense, psychological type of horror, where the whole thing is that you have to deduce what's happened based on having limited information. Right. There's a suspense there that comes from not having all the pieces of the puzzle. And this game just hands that to you right up front. They just tell you what you need to know.
Yeah, now correct me if I'm wrong, but is the Ascension 2000's dodge setup slightly glitched in that it's moving at a very high speed consistently compared to every other character's?
I don't think that's actually her. If you've been paying attention throughout the LP, you'll see that various monsters' attacks actually have different speeds at which they do the dodge mechanic.
I'll have you know that, well, you should know that I haven't been paying attention consistently, and this should be incredibly clear to both of us. But no, I can kind of see that now, and honestly, it is kind of an interesting element of the mechanics.
I think it's fine, except that adds an element of fake difficulty where they continue ramping it up until you get to like this late in the game, where there's pretty much no way that you can dodge it because nobody has superhuman reflexes. No, we can't burn the hair off. We have to go find another way of doing this. I mean, we last time it was a comb. This trick is kind of weird. There's a way to get to that chalk outline, I guess that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The game really doesn't want me to get there. So I start scheming. And I realize that using the skateboard, for better or worse, doesn't really seem to make a difference. Like, it just does not register any of it.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the intended solution. I'm sure there's like a special way that you can do it, you know? Like a certain path you can take or something to that effect.
I imagine it has something to do with hitting the hands with dollies, since that seemed to be part of what you were doing previously.
See, I told you last episode, you're way too smart for this. See, I wouldn't have figured that out. I just bulldozed my way through these challenges.
It is what it is.
I thought I was interacting with the hand there for a minute.
So, quick note, since we were talking about YIIK a little bit earlier, where I think the key failing is, ultimately, is in the fact that YIIK, because it's so focused on the dreamscape itself and gives you essentially no details about its protagonist or the kind of what those visuals could mean to them specifically, is that it does quite a bit more with its surreal imagery to build up intrigue about the exact circumstances its protagonist finds themselves in.
Yeah, there's precious little information given about the protagonist of Yume Nikki. Also, this is about where I figured out that I could just stop myself on the wall.
Very good.
Problem solved. Come here, hair.
Yeah, the key point then is that here we actually have quite a bit of context to work with. We've already spoken with the Essentia 2000. We've gotten at least the somewhat coherent outline of what this is and who the Essentia 2000 is and what's happening as a result. But it's nothing in this dungeon is really ultimately supporting any specific theme or concept that we've been exposed to at that point. It's a bit of, as you've pointed out, imagery relating to things like transhumanism and body image that seem to be at least of some concern to the protagonists up to this point, though not in a way that seems to connect to any greater themes of the plot. But we're just kind of expected to roll with it because that's where we are now, so deal.
I guess I should have figured that there was a boss fight coming up here. You know, what with the weirdly generous vending machine and the save point, and when's the last time I've actually been afraid of a boss in this game?
I'm trying to figure out what exactly that giant robot's a knockoff of.
They're so familiar.
Gundam.
And yet, something feels wrong.
I want to say I'm reminded more of a Xenoblade Chronicles X. That's the one.
I would never harm you, Alex. But it is logical to assume that one of my many parallel lives may have some reason.
I knew you'd come back.
Hello.
Somehow, you look different. So many lives wasted, taken, and experimented on in hopes of obtaining this moment.
Do you think the uncanniness of this design is intentional?
Absolutely. It's someone who's trying and not quite succeeding at making someone old and wrinkled.
Kill you in the way that you killed me time and time again.
All I can think of is that this guy is a reject from a Shin Megami Tensei game.
What's he talking about?
Do you ever feel guilty? Do you?
If you've ever played Shin Megami Tensei 4 or possibly one of the Devil Survivor games, he kind of looks like he belongs in one of those.
Huh.
Except to those games' credit, they actually explain who those characters are.
They're trying. They're trying really hard.
My research. My wife. My kids.
And I'll give it to him. This voice actor is really trying to convey the emotion here.
What the hell were you worth? You're a thief! Nothing more!
Again, a good emotional performance, but so utterly devoid of context that I'm just kind of saying, well, okay, that's good.
Yeah, this person's clearly in the Marlene bracket.
There's a void in my mind.
I like to think that Essentia, with her hand over her mouth, was yawning for a second there.
Mom, is that you?
How long has this life been lingering here?
Wait, is the Essentia her own mom? Is that what's going on here? Are we going to get all Back to the Future in here?
I mean, if we want to go for maximum psychosexual strangeness, the Essentia could be his sister.
Come here. Let me hug you. Let me say I'm sorry in your ear.
I'm not exactly sure if that's
What?
worse.
Get away from me!
It seems as if you harmed him in some way. Alex, look out!
It is implied that I am rushing at you. In spite of that excellent performance, he does not, in fact, get custom voice lines or anything in his boss fight. He starts off the fight by stunning Alex, which is obviously not great. Let's go ahead and fix that up real quick.
He does, however, get a very strange kind of Gabber-like boss theme.
I actually dodged that first one completely by accident. I thought I was running away.
Ah. Yeah, no, this boss fight has suddenly introduced a new mechanic for dodges, which is, I guess, kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I actually think that's nice when this game, you know, doesn't just phone it in. Come on. Come on. There we go.
Ah, it wasn't exactly one hit as I was...
And it does 189 damage.
Yep.
What is this? This is when I come up with my master strategy.
LP toss.
No, LP toss, but combined with the Essentia 2000 sleep shot, which I completely forgot she had until now, because it has never been relevant, as it only hits one target. But it puts them to sleep with 100% certainty, and then they wake up when they're hit again. So I can just stun lock Yuzu until I either run out of energy to cast Sleep Shot or run out of PP to cast LP Toss.
Well, I can't imagine either of those being an issue before he dies from the absolutely ridiculous amount of damage that LP Toss does.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is not the way that Axe Studios wanted me to approach this fight.
Well, you know what? You did, and so they're just going to have to deal.
Once again, you underestimate me!
And again, that's also something that seems a bit more reminiscent of a Shin Megami Tensei title, because some bosses you can cheese right out with strategies like that.
I mean, Disgaea is built on the premise of cheesing bosses. This time, I will not be caught off guard. Unfortunately, the Essentia 2000 and Alex are both a little bit low on their core resources. I'm probably going to have to fill up on PP here a little bit, which could, you know, mess with my rhythm.
Well, speaking of messing with rhythm, it seems as though you're still able to knock off approximately a third of his health with the one hit.
Yeah, I knew this build was a great idea. This may or may not actually be the speedrun strat build.
Well,
We have these 9 volts. Now, we have finally some small use for these 9-volt batteries that we've been collecting throughout this dungeon. Because I can just, again, do the Sleep Shot LP Toss combo and keep him locked, so this just totally trivializes this boss fight. Which really sucks, because honestly, I kind of wanted to see what his final form had in store, you know what I mean? Like, does he get cool rocket launcher powers and stuff like Essentia?
Well, now that I'm seeing this new design for this robot, I want to say that it's an Armored Core 3 generic unit, so...
Oh, like a muscle tracer?
Yes. So I'm not incredibly impressed by it either way.
Yeah, but still. I was expecting a lot of things, but a giant robot was not one of them. Especially not a giant robot that looks very different from the giant robot that he's next to.
I am sorry I put you in harm's way. However, while I am with you, nothing bad can ever happen. I am here to protect you.
You keep telling yourself that, Essentia.
I think
Yes,
I need
also,
to answer some more
something
questions.
bad's already
I'm
happened.
really confused.
We've
Why did this
been
Japanese
in this
guy know
dungeon
me?
for the better part
Why
of
did he
5
attack me?
episodes,
What
and
did
I
I ever
still
do to
don't
him?
know what any of this has to do with the story to this
Based on
point.
the information I have.
Well, I figured that this story was
This
all about
information is
tedium.
The same information that you have. So,
Yeah,
these are
that's,
simply
again, its
educated
most
guesses
consistent
based
theme
on
thus
my own
far.
personal bias.
We're going into monologue mode again.
Okay,
She's
fine.
breaking out the David
What do you
Cage.
think it is?
I think it would be a safe assumption that, in a parallel life, you have harmed me. that this Yuzu Imajo had some sort of relationship with you, and you hurt him in some way. When he saw you, he recognized something in your soul and became angry. This is why he attacked.
This is actually another thing that I want to ask about while we're kind of picking apart the metaphysics of this idea of parallel lives. Is there anything that indicates that you preserve your memories across lifetimes? Like the Essentia 2000 has all these, she's kind of a gestalt representation of all her parallel lives, right? The Velas and the Beras, and I think Odo was her name.
We become offensive. It is in these moments where we decide what type of human we will be. Which is worse? To harm someone in the past and continue to harm them by justifying your past actions, or harming someone in the past and accepting...
The only supposition I can make with that is that, strictly speaking, the Vela we know is still independent from her, and as such is actually able to remember the events of the universe she hailed from originally.
No, it's not that. That's not the question. The question is, if you traverse the soul space from Universe A to Universe B, and you take the place of your representation in Universe B, do you get Universe B's memories in addition to your original memories?
I suppose we'd have to ask Vela in specific, but then... Again, in a much more fundamental question, I say, what does the answer to that question have to do with anything we've seen in the story up to this point?
Well, my first thought was that might explain why Yuzu Imajo knows anything about Alex, right?
Right.
Or is he just sort of a representation, a cameo of one of the Essentia 2000's parallel lives? And thus this is like her way of somehow lashing out at Alex. But she seems really surprised about it too. Like, she's like, why is this guy here?
And that is a question we both share, so...
Something that all versions of me know to be a mistake. However, the overwhelming feeling of doing the right thing takes over, and I am forced to make a choice.
Unfortunately, the key problem in kind of trying to analyze and deal with something this abstract, or more specifically that introduces this many details of varying degrees of importance with no real connective tissue or theme to try and latch onto, is that, well, honestly, my own particular analysis fails me because nothing about it seems to be written with any degree of consideration of what this says in terms of theme or straight up narrative.
It's almost like they took this "a wizard did it" sort of approach to writing hard sci-fi. Because what's here could actually be pretty compelling, right? If you didn't have it written by somebody who got all their ideas from David Cage.
Exists in all humans, and then work to polish the blemish on your soul that had led to that action.
The only thing I can kind of get at is that here it's trying to shoehorn in this kind of theme of self-improvement and not allowing your guilt to prevent you from trying to improve your lot in life. But
I didn't realize that this was going to go full self-help book toward the end of this game.
The Essentia 2000 went on staring at me with that expressionless face of hers, a face of plastic. Looking at her, I thought of a satellite floating in space, a drifting piece of man-made material.
Honestly, it's the kind of thing that's telling me at this point that Alex's monologue and proclivity to engage in them probably isn't the worst part of the game's writing. It's just the fact that it has no real direction to go with any of it.
And amazingly, it's not unique to him. I thought this was one of these things where, you know, maybe we would encounter some parallel life of Alex and we would know it's him because they also have a tendency to monologue. Wouldn't that be postmodern and self-aware?
That's actually a very clever idea.
There is one last location
Diacorn, can you go to the parallel universe and write this game?
More questions when we arrive.
Oh man, I'll have to go to a parallel universe where I give a shit.
Taste in my mouth. But even sipping from a water bottle wouldn't cleanse me of it. The whole situation felt like a dream.
I'd also just like to dwell a bit on the idea of I want to wash that bitter taste out of my mouth, but I couldn't suck on a water bottle and get rid of it.
Seeing Sammy vanish, meeting entities, and
I mean,
my mind should have prepared me for this.
I mean,
You know,
at least make yourself
you
some
did.
tea, dude.
I wanted to ask the Ascension 2000.
There are
if I
better
could
ways
feel
to wash
feelings
the
of my parallel
bitter
lives.
taste of disappointment out of your mouth.
I realize now I was just seeking an explanation for the various feelings that were surging through my heart. I felt closer to Vela, closer to, well, every single parallel life of the Ascension 2000. And yet, furthest from Sammy. Is Sammy really all that important to me? Or had I just been delaying joining the real world with all this adventure?
Yes, yes, you
I
have. The
really
second
never
one.
wanted to
I
find
think-
her now that
I
know
think
what
you're-
finding her actually
I
meant.
have no idea how he came around to this
Really did.
conclusion based on the incredibly vague descriptor of various feelings.
Next, because
But
if I
yes,
had never
Alex,
learned
there
what
are
I was about to
really better things for you to do with your life than engage in whatever this
learn, all
is.
hope is lost.
There are a lot of ways that Alex could feel right now, but mostly he feels regretful because the plot told him to be. It's nuts to me that this is the point where they start trying to make Alex turn over a new leaf, right? Where he starts actually becoming self-reflective in a way that's not, like, pretentious and out of touch.
Those stairs were the exit to my mind dungeon. Now we have returned to the foyer. In order to proceed, we must first return to the beginning.
It's absolutely one of those things where we say, well, I don't know that anybody says it in particular, but it's definitely a concept that's coming to sharp relief in watching through this game with you, Diacorn. Whenever there's a good story being told, whenever something's actually being interesting and catches our attention, we don't tend to really focus on the story as such or elements of the plot. We're really invested into characters and what's going on. But when it's this bad, we can't help but think of the author and go, who the hell wrote this?